Hey everybody. Oh wait. Hey everybody. Yep. Welcome to WasmCloud Wednesday for Wednesday, May 28th. We've got a pretty short and sweet agenda for you today. I actually need to update the links a little bit here. But let me go ahead and share and then we can talk about it. So, on the agenda, there was me. I did want to bring attention to something that released, I think it was at the end of last week. I actually saw it and then took a little holiday around the long weekend here in the US. So I actually just got to play with it pretty recently and it's pretty cool. I think we should really consider adding this to our dev toolbox with Wash, if that's possible. And then I think we should do a since we're at the end of May and we're going to be in the last month of quarter 2. We should probably do a little bit of a roadmap update and consider where we are on the roadmap, and how we've been doing, and then talk about what we want to do for the last month or so of quarter 2. And then we can talk about anything that we want to because community meeting. So let's go ahead and get started with the demo and discussion. So I'm not sure if you all have used this before for running WebAssembly, but the Wasmtime engine, which is the one that we use underneath WasmCloud to actually execute the WebAssembly components that we run, interpret the instructions, all that fun stuff. We use Wasmtime, and that is the Bytecode Alliance WebAssembly runtime. If you're in dark mode, watch out. Light mode incoming. This, which is the Bytecode Alliance WebAssembly runtime, they release pretty much monthly, like very frequently, frequent cadence releases for the engine, and we update that as a library inside of WasmCloud. So if you're using WasmCloud, you don't really ever need to interface with this directly. But you can actually execute WebAssembly modules and now components directly from the command line. So you can install WasmTime as a binary and then invoke it directly without specifically loading, or invoke components directly without specifically loading them into like WasmTime, like an embedding or in WasmCloud. And I want to just bring this up because I played with it this morning and I had a really nice experience with it. Like this is exactly what I've wanted Wash Call to be like for quite a while. I think that the Wash Call utility would essentially be an enhancement of this because of some things I'll talk about like in a moment. But I wanted to call special attention to this and give kudos to the folks working on this because this came as a surprise to me and it's really cool. So let me show the project that I was working on, and let's just do the demo, and then we can talk about it after. So I was doing a variety of things this morning. Everybody should see my VS Code window now, so let me know if you can't. And I have a little wit here that I just generated from the wash new package. It just exports a single function. So very simple WebAssembly component. It is a function that translates from the shape that you would get back from WASI config runtime when you call get all. Let me go ahead and pull that up really quick, actually. WASI config runtime. Take a look. What I was experimenting with is essentially taking this type, which you can call it runtime for Wasm Cloud, and to retrieve all of the different configuration values that you have available at runtime for that component. So it's a list tuple tuple string, which is basically a no map or dictionary implementation of a map of string string. And I was thinking it'd be really cool if we could have a function that converts this from this map structure to a strongly typed configuration record, like something that I define in my WIT for as a developer, or something that is defined like in some library, like a WASI Redis library, like with all the things. So that's the background for this demo. Um, and so I got to do this. I did a little vibe coding or whatever, and now I have a compiled WebAssembly component. And if I inspect it, then I can see if I take a look at the wit, it's got this bundle of imports, which I could probably just virtualize away, but it exports my one function. And the implementation of this is fairly simple. What we do is we take the properties, which comes from, we would use this by saying, hey, give me all my config that I have. And then we convert those into the Rust representation of like a JSON value. And then we deserialize those specific values as my strongly generated type. So it's like a config round trip, basically. Nothing too crazy, but I coded some Wasm in Rust. Now, if you were at this point, like where would you go to test this? Like what would you do? If I was writing this in Rust, I would probably start writing up some unit tests and then calling this function directly. That notoriously is a little more challenging with WebAssembly because some of this code that's generated is specifically for the WASM32 WASI P2 target, and so you can't run that on your local machine, which is a little frustrating. But so maybe you would just skip that step, right? And you would just want to run this WebAssembly component and give it a try. Well, so you would do something like wash dev, and then you would stand this up in wasmCloud, but then you'd be like, okay, well, how do I call this function? Unfortunately, wash call only supports two different kinds of functions, either HTTP or a very simple, I guess WASI CLI run might work, but or a function that doesn't take any arguments and returns a string, which is extremely inflexible. So this is where the wasmTime run with the dash dash invoke flag comes in, and it's super, super cool. So what you can actually do is the syntax for this is just wasmTime run dash dash invoke, and dash dash invoke basically tells wasmTime you're going to be invoking an export on that component that's not the WASI CLI run export. So it's not just a CLI that you're running, you're calling a function on a reactor component. I know these are a lot of like WebAssembly words, but basically you're exporting a function and you want to call it. And the really cool thing is this flag, the dash dash invoke, all you need to do is write the function that you're calling. So inside of the wit, I have parse config, I call parse config, and then you can provide arguments directly, just like you were calling this random function, flashbang incoming, by using the, where is it? By using the Wasm Value Encoding or wave syntax for representing all of your complex types. So these are pretty reasonable, Booleans true and false, integers are normal, tuples, lists, records, all of those things are supported. So if I actually just hit enter here, then what we did here is we passed in a list of string configuration values. Two of them were strings, and then the other one was a Boolean. And you'll notice that this is a Boolean, but it's, a string Boolean. And then out comes the parsed configuration with the correct types. And like I mentioned, you can actually do this in with a more complex setup. I had this set up from before, but I wanted to simplify the command. So you can have a record or a variant or an optional. And where is it? Some no timeout. Sure. No. Wait, no. You have to build it in between that, turns out. So you can actually pass in a whole bunch of complex types like string, number, a Boolean, a nested record or struct, a variant, optional value, and you'll get out that parsed config. So this is really, really cool. Not because of the config thing. This is basically just an experiment example, but that you can build a WebAssembly component And if you know what import or if you know what input you want to give to a specific function, it's really easy to iterate on this in a really quick way. So I really want to explore this. This demo was meant to spur some discussion. I really want to explore how we could use this with either Wash Dev or excuse me, with wash dev or wash call. Inherently, the challenge that comes of this is not necessarily just running and calling the components export. It really is. I'll stop sharing here for a moment, but happy to talk about the code more. It really is a challenge when it comes to runtime dependencies that you need. Like if my function wanted to do some caching and store that in a key value store, now I would need something that implements that key value store. That might be a bad example because I think Wasmtime supports like an in-memory or Redis connection. But hopefully you get the point. If I wanted to store it in a S3 blob store or something, then there's an extra dependency that I can't just test in a stateless way on the command line. So there's a couple of things that we would need to figure out there. But in the meantime, if folks are looking to try this out, let me go ahead and link the blog. I might have already done it, but here you go. If folks are looking to try this out, this is available now in Wasmtime 33. So pretty interested if it just works nicely for you. And I haven't really looked into how we could maybe embed this in Wash to make call better, or if that's really the right thing to do. So I'm curious if folks have any thoughts or questions here about Wasmtime run dash dash invoke. It's a quiet bunch today. Well, I I was looking at this. Oh yeah. I always wait like just a little to
So I
not
was
enough.
waiting to see if anybody has any question. I thought that this is already available for some reason because I had seen examples, but irrespective, uh, remote function calls is something that, I mean, any sort of dependencies would immediately complicate this thing, right? So if you want to do, let's say, unit testing with this, to at least, in my opinion, something that seems reasonable is stopping the dependencies, right? And if Wash wants to provide any features, that would be, I think, that stopping capability in order to just test that component. Because if you say that now I want to run a component outside Wasm Cloud, but do everything that I can do on Wasm Cloud, then the question is that what's the purpose of Wasm Cloud? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think you kind of hit at the heart of the issue. It's like as soon as you get to maybe as soon as you get to actually running this in Wasm Cloud, because I like this is a WebAssembly component that I've written that just implements like parsing. Like it's very very simple. But as soon as you get to the actual cloud connection piece of it, it's not this thing that you can just invoke out of nowhere. Um, so it's a good point. I think I think that definitely makes the difference more apparent between run and call because call is for something that's already
There
running.
is a MCP server version of this example. There is a component that is run directly by Wasmtime. So it's a good example of a use case that runs, let's say, just by Wasmtime, but provides a feature that some people find very interesting to use.
You said there is an MCP server of this, or this is
Yeah, yeah,
potential.
yeah. I can send you the link.
I
What?
mean, I'm technically working on one too with Joe, fellow WasmCloud maintainer.
Which one is yours? That is that basically this, like run a component and then make a
Yeah,
thing.
it's the same thing. Takes the component, uses the WIT, exports that as the function. We just need to actually like we've just been working on it in private. We just need to open it up, but we have some stuff for it.
Okay, well, shame on both of you for letting me do this whole demo and think that I found something
No,
cool when you knew about it.
but, but Taylor, it wasn't about let's show the other one. I just wanted to kind of indicate that aside from testing, there there are some useful cases for it because I saw in the Slack chat somebody asking a couple of weeks ago about MCP, right?
Yeah. I was agreeing with you for what it's worth, Masood. Like I'm just saying there's multiple use cases here. I am curious though, Brooks, like I would love to have this kind of invoke functionality in Wash, like you're saying, just kind of pull it in. Um, we might have to adapt it still for some of the stuff you can do on Wasm Cloud, but I think we can take some of the principles still.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to. It's a delicate balance. I don't want Wash to be this like super monolithic thing that just includes a bunch of different utilities from the Wasm ecosystem because things like WasmTime serve, WasmTime run, Wasm tools component inspect or print, like all of those things are super, super useful. I use them all the time when I'm developing things just for Wasm Cloud. So I want those things to be available for people who are just trying out Wasm Cloud for the first time. Something that we don't have to say when you're getting started, like, hey, install Wasm Time, install Wasm Tools, install Wash, install all this stuff. So not really sure what the exact balance is there because there's not like a general consensus. It's not like everybody uses dev containers or Nix shell or anything like that. Um, so it could be interesting. Maybe there's a better solution and like of vendoring Wasm Time or and Wasm Tools. Like TinyGo does that when you install the tool chain, it downloads some of those binaries. Um, because I don't want to just reinvent the wheel, but these kinds of utilities, depending on the use case, can be super valuable for debugging. Well, thanks, Masood. Um, yeah. Yeah, maybe that's the ultimate takeaway here. Because one of the things that was super, and if you're in a space to talk, feel free to come off, but I'll just highlight it. You said wash call could use a more flexible function IO formatting to be limited, not to be limited to non-parameterized string only results. That might just be the one of the best takeaways here is that this the wave WebAssembly value encoding I think is a really simple but seems to be somewhat like flexible approach to providing parameters to a function that adopting that in wash call would give a lot more power for folks trying to test their currently running application with wash call because you can pass parameters. We can use the that reference that I pulled up for wave. Here, I'll go ahead and share it again just for fun. That reference that I pulled up for the value encoding is actually just looks like a library that we could import. I'm sure we could use it the same way that WasmTime run does. And then it would be really neat to be able to basically take this WasmTime run config and replace it with something like wash call. And then, I think we would need the component ID instead, which would maybe dash dash invoke. I don't know. But we could basically take the same, if we could support this same structure, like the same way of doing it, then that would provide. that would provide a really nice consistent experience coming from like a basic component testing. Maybe you're familiar with it from before to calling a more complex function. Sounds kind of nice. Okay. Yeah, I really wanted to bring this one up because there's always a little bit of a barrier between me having an idea, putting it into WebAssembly, and then testing it. Like I feel like I default to an HTTP like invoked component just because I can curl it and start working with something that I recognize. So it's really a little frustrating to develop a custom interface and then not have a really good way to call it. So um, this might be something that's really easy to parse and pull out. So we'll have to take a look at that, and we can fire file a feature request in the wasmCloud repo because that would be a neat way to do the wash call thing. Oh yeah. Yeah, you can just like, man, this is easy. You can just parse the thing from a string. That's it. All right. Well, I mean, please feel free to speak out if you think this is a horrible idea, if you have more thoughts, but I would love to file a feature request for this. I'm not really sure how urgently this would need to get done. Maybe it goes on the next roadmap or something, but I think this is something that like watch call is a pretty limited utility. So it would be great to kind of extend that and make it a little nicer. All right. Well, unless folks have other things that, wanted me to dive into with the Wasm time. Oh yeah, Victor.
Hey, yeah, I wanted to say regarding that filing an issue. So there is an issue actually that's been open since 2004. So 2024, not 2004. Not that long. And it's there, and we basically avoided moving forward on any kind of sort of advanced inputs for wash call because we were waiting for Wave to sort of mature and then swap it in. So if you want to work on this, there is actually no need to make an issue. It already exists.
Check that out. Nice.
Yeah, got reopened this year as well. So whoever wants to work on it, it's out there.
Oh yeah, we were just getting Stalebot closed.
Yeah, Stalebot's gone now though, so it shouldn't happen again.
Got him. Yeah, good call, Victor. I forgot about. I remembered that we wanted more complex types, but that we were
Yeah.
basically like, well, that seems
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Yeah. I remember because I think this came up this came up when I wanted to add some like intermediate types or like for some known interfaces because I think right now we basically have just a generic one. We have two basically, one that does HTTP and then a generic one that just does like calls a function with no arguments or whatever that returns a string or something like that. So there was another case of that. I think messaging or something was we're going to try and put that in. And then, someone was like, we Wave existed back then, but it just, wasn't as polished as it is now. But looks like it, quote unquote, should be easy.
Yeah.
Quote unquote. We'll see.
See, this would take like 2 seconds. No. Yeah, that's super cool. This would be, I mean, HTTP is the stickler. I don't know if WasmTime Run has an example with, I mean, like with HTTP, there's like
I don't know that Wave can do that quite. I mean, that would be very, very impressive if it could.
Sorry, HTTP.
Like, you know,
the
wrangle
example that I posted is HTTP, right?
Like I know we support it with watch call, but I don't know if Wave does.
yeah. Was there an invoke example with HTTP?
So the MCP server that I posted is HTTP
Are you
based.
sure they're not using some sort of like alternate HTTP representation of an HTTP request?
So you know, our HTTP, when I'm saying ours, wasmCloud or WRPC, is uses Wasmtime HTTP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The reason I was a little bit surprised or thought it would be impressive if it did that was because like WASI HTTP uses like resources and stuff, right? And like the HTTP, you could imagine like an HTTP request is just like, you know, basically textual, right? Because if you're, you know, dealing with HTTP1, and honestly even HTTP2, you could think of like a serialization that would work for an HTTP request. But the thing is in Wasm, when you're actually using an HTTP request, you have to sort of like, you have to create some resources and sort of put a whole bunch of things together. And as far as I know, Wave supports basic types. Or I say basic types, but I mean like the types that are not resources, or like, you know, the new like stream stuff and whatnot. So I would be surprised if it was really straightforward to do. I mean, it might be possible, but very, very difficult. But I would be surprised.
So I want to stand corrected on the call. You know, I had seen this example a month ago, and no, it's not HTTP. Sorry, it isn't. It's STDIO.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say like it's not impossible, right? Like if you wrote some sort of like, because you know that's the beauty of WIT, right? You could write a simpler HTTP abstraction, right? And then you could one that would fit in Wave, and then we could do that, right? Like, actually, this is actually kind of an interesting idea. But let's just think of like HTTP 1.1, right? Something super simple. You can technically encode the entire request as a string. You could, right? Now, if you think about that, you could take a component that essentially imports like the fully formed WASI HTTP, and you could write an adapter that turns that component into one that takes this really simple one. And like you can do all the little like all the sort of like advanced resource stuff and the full like robustness of WASI HTTP. So like WASI HTTP is hard to serialize because it tries to be very robust in how it handles let's say asynchrony and like, you know, moving bytes around and stuff like that. You could write a little shim layer that lets people, you know, put in a simple request of whatever form, right? It could be a record, could be an enum, could be a string, whatever. Turn it into an HTTP request, right? In this sort of like middle layer, and then feed that to a component that expects to get a, you know, the fully formed like WASI HTTP request. But of course, that's, you know, that's a whole lot of theoretical work that has to be done for that to be supported. And I don't think people necessarily need it, because we do already support that in wash call. Like we do that stuff and then send over the request essentially via the WRPC layer. But, you know, what I'm trying to say is that even if there are ways to do it, there are ways to send more complex types over Wave. I think that Wave supports. You just need to do a little conversion first. Since Wave supports so many basic types, you could try and like replicate a more complex type with an adapter. But yeah, it's interesting. I would like, again, I would have been very surprised if they found a way to like, you know, very easily represent all the complexity that is WASI HTTP, like a WASI HTTP incoming request on like someone's just writing it out on the command line. I would have been surprised.
Yeah, I see this as like a mixture of things. I feel like there's a couple raw types that are probably pretty easy to get without too much massaging. There's some where I was only half joking when I said new CLI type parser, because I think like that's the kind of thing we would need is some sort of parser that does it. And then for the complex types, we'll just have to say these are the subtypes we support. Um, Even better, okay, now I'm out in pie in the sky mode, so forgive me for a second, but like if we had it could almost be like you could provide a do it via Wasm plugins that could add in all the things that do all the parsing. So for example, with WASI HTTP, we could say here's a body, like here's a body, here's my headers, and kind of make it similar to curl, right? And it'd be like an extension to like the CLI that you would plug in and then parse it um that Wasm plugin that's there. So anyway, it could be a bad idea, but even if we started with just a specific common subset, like the WASI cloud interfaces and those kind of things, that would allow us to have the complex types there and just say like, here's your parsing options. It means you can't express everything you could, right? Like you can't express sending a stream probably in our first draft of doing this with HTTP, but you can like send a body just like you would with like curl. So there's some ideas there, but it could be bad.
Yeah, I just kind of typed out what you were saying, Taylor, in chat. But basically, like,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a really good place for plugins to fit. Like, if we could define some sort of simple representation of the complex thing, and then use a plugin to, process that wave specification, or I say specification, but that wave sort of serialization into the more complex thing. And of course, it'd be like you'd have to do them all one by one or whatever. But I think like incoming requests and probably messaging are probably one of the most important bits. Yeah, the WebAssembly value encoding plugin.
Feel like we always end up wave plugins is a better way to say that. We always end up with a silly name. Actually sounds cool. Um, well, yeah. Hey, I think that's probably enough on that one today. Unless folks have other, thoughts going forward there. I did at the bottom of this issue add in some of the information that we talked about in this call, just like, hey, we could totally do it this way, and it would be a really consistent experience with Wasmtime run. So that would be really cool. As Victor pointed out, Victor, I think you implemented this, but we can call HTTP like the HTTP export now with wash call, so we can just keep that and then add this in. That minus on messaging, like the body needing to be bytes, we would almost have something that can call everything. So another messaging mode would be cool too. So that would be really cool. So I'll leave this one on here, but keep this as good future inspiration for what what we may want to throw on the roadmap for quarter 3. Or anybody's welcome to take this at any time. Doesn't need to be a roadmap thing, but I'll try to keep it in mind if it hasn't been done by then.
Wait, is it marked completed on the roadmap right now, or
Oh,
is that
wait,
the
this?
roadmap is completed?
Um, it I think it's because the stale bot closed it, and then our automation was like, oh, it's done. Hey, good call. Also, get it. Looks like we were thinking about this a little while ago, but well, yeah, we were probably thinking about it approximately in 2024. So, yeah. look at that. It's almost like the 1 year anniversary of this, and it's like perfect timing.
More perfect than I guess 2 years later, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Marked is ready for work, but we'll figure that out. Or you can just have AI finish it. Whatever. All right, all right. All jokes aside. Well that was a fun discussion. Thanks for brainstorming for a little bit on that one. Everybody is good fun. Um Only other thing that I have on the agenda today is just to take a look at the quarter 2 roadmap, just to see how we're doing. We're strongly into quarter 2. We did brainstorm this, and I think basically in the beginning of May. I'll have to check back on the um wait, how do quarters work? April, May, June. Yeah. In the beginning of May, end of April. So, we were a little shorter on time than usual. But taking a look, we've been making some good movement here. We have a couple things that were completed. Great stuff, Eric, on the docs for error handling, which really speaks to a broader issue of adding the error handling in the first place, which is awesome. We had a community member actually come in and take on showing available updates for Wash Wadham Nats when available, which should be this has been completed, but Victor, I think you're going through the motion of releasing all the things right now. So with the new Wash release, this will actually show up. Yeah, anything, I don't know if there's anything to mention there, but just mention this should be delivered soon to a Wash near you. Couple of things we have that are good and in progress. Got another community member who's working on Wash Dev, having an option for standing up the washboard, which would be really nice just to have the dashboard to go along with the development environment. Oh, sweet. Yeah, merging as we speak. Rabel, who's another community member who's been really, really active over the last couple of weeks, I believe actually has a pull request open for this one for replacing the RPC and control flags with nats. So, or dash dash nats. So that'll be really nice to have. So that one should come across. And then I have
Oh,
a oh,
and Brooks, there's one more, actually a fix that went in for not context not being used. I believe by, was it Wash Dev? It might have been Wash Dev. Yeah, where sort of if you had a Wasm Cloud or sorry, a Wash context, locally it wouldn't respect it when you were doing that. So that came up relatively recently. So that's also going to make it in once this new version of Wash is out.
nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Amanda Cameron, for opening this issue and Victor for knocking it out. Really awesome stuff. That's pretty sweet. Um, and That's awesome. So that'll be included in your release, right, Victor? Cool. Your
Yeah,
release.
as soon as we get the release actually out. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. TBD. We've got a discussion item for another day on that, but I'm going to ignore it for right now. Unless you want to talk about it. I don't know. Seems bad.
No,
That's
no,
fine.
no. I mean, I think it was I think the problem was, between the seat and the keyboard this time. But we'll see. Next time, I'm not gonna. I mean, I just need to remember that I'm not actually smarter than Cargo Smart Release. Cargo Smart Release is pretty smart, and I should just let it, bump whatever it wants to bump, and stay out of its way. But yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Cool. But yeah, this one's I think in review. I might have approved it, so I might just need to go and merge it. I've got a fix for this allow latest not taking effect. I ended up diving into this the other day, which is super nice. And just as a reminder, we've got a couple of good issues here on, I wish I could hide this, good issues here on the roadmap for folks who are looking to contribute for the first time, or if you're a returning contributor trying to take a look at the project. The items in Good First Issue in the Ready for Work tab are great places to start. They deal with things like examples, smaller components, things that are like quicker but very impactful lifts in the wasmCloud host or our CLI tooling. So anybody taking a look at contributing, this is a great place to look. In the development tab, anybody should feel welcome to take these as well. They do generally require a little bit more knowledge around wasmCloud. Like taking a look at these, the only one that seems a little bit more complex is moving the directories around in Wash just to make sure that gets juggled and put in at the right time to not cause a bunch of conflicts. But those are definitely welcome for the taking as well. But generally, I think, this roadmap we intentionally planned a little bit smaller. Doesn't mean that we have lower velocity. We always have a pretty big level, or sorry, big number of PRs and commits and contributions that are going in. We're just trying to keep the roadmap really nice and scoped. So, yeah, we really wanted to create that good first issue column because it's the best. I won't speak for all the maintainers, but it's the best part of my experience in open source when people come and contribute to the project. It's really fun. So, um, I'm pretty happy about where we're at with the Q2 roadmap, and I think we can just keep doing it, do the thing. Do folks have any questions or comments about the tickets, the things that are on the Q2 roadmap, or maybe some work in progress that they have going on? All right, sounds good. Well, folks, that's the end of the planned agenda for today. Does anyone have does anybody have any other items they'd like to talk about around Wasm Cloud, WebAssembly, just anything in general? I think we've got, looks like another 10, 15 minutes left in the call for free time.
Yeah, if it's fine, I would raise an additional topic.
Yeah, Florian, go ahead.
So it's about this the investigation I'm currently doing. So it will maybe take longer than just 10 or 15 minutes. It's about, so on Slack we started to discuss briefly the case that which is described only just a tiny bit in our quick guide. So if you overload the Hello World component described in our quick guide, then the entire application actually breaks. This includes the HTTP server provider as well as the Hello World component. So I'm currently trying to look into it and struggle a little bit to understand all the async magic implemented in wasmCloud and which context is used for what, or for which component or provider part. And this would be interesting to discuss here live, actually. So far I found out that somehow the handshake magic is actually breaking. So if you overload a component, which means you send more requests in parallel than actually the replica count is defined in the application manifest, then you break it. So, and there's actually a magic number. So if you define 1, sending 3 requests in parallel is totally fine and not breaking anything. Sending 4 breaks the application already, but the lock mechanism is still working. So then there's a semaphore implementation for ensuring that no more invocations can be handled than defined in the application manifest. This still works, but if you send 5 requests in parallel, then even that does not work anymore. So then the handshake already is not working between, I assume, the server or the provider and the component. And maybe let me share my screen, then we can discuss a little bit more in detail what I'm actually referring to. Sorry. Yeah, not very familiar with Zoom, to be honest. So let's see. I hope this is, oh, okay. Well, sharing my entire screen to the public internet is a little bit scary, but okay, I hope I will not share anything too serious. Can you see my Visual Studio Code?
I can't. I cannot. You should be able to pick
Okay.
the VS Code window, right?
Yeah, I have several open, and
Oh.
unfortunately, Zoom does not provide any preview. Okay, let's try that again. Ah, okay. So, oh, great. I have to reopen Zoom to allow to share my screen. Okay, I will be back in a second. I'm totally sorry.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Capability-driven security.
Yeah.
like every single time. So frustrating.
I mean, so if you just compose the Zoom app with, okay, I'll stop now.
Hmm.
It says that, but it's not always true. I mean, sometimes I don't restart the app and it still works.
So let's try again. Oh, it says that the host is not allowing to share my screen.
Oh, come
So
on. I
Brooks,
gave you the thing before. Nah.
I rejoined you. I have to approve my permissions again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It
All right.
says
You
zero
should,
trust capabilities. Everything is time limited.
you should be able to do it now. I gave
Okay,
like,
cool.
I
So,
think.
well, now I also have previews, and that's great. So, okay.
Oh, nice.
So I hope you see it now, the diagram.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. So here you can see on the left-hand side what I just called the provider context. So in case of our quick guide, it would be the HTTP server provider. And on the right-hand side, the HTTP Hello World component, or here representing the NUTS clients, or sometimes also called the WRPC clients, including the subjects or prefix and the associated inboxes, which are used between or for exchanging messages or yeah, stuff, and also the overall application subject, which is also referred or described in our documentation. So for the Hello World component, where it's very nice and long string, which is then actually boiling down to this incoming handler export of the component. And the problem is that actually the HTTP server provider tries to publish a handshake here, which includes also the request itself actually, or the path of the request. And then usually, or because it's a subject, there's a subscription on it, and this will trigger automatically then the context of the component, which will do some stuff like creating additional inboxes, for example, and then actually publishing the response. And this publishing the response is not working anymore. The entire logic actually in creating new inboxes and so on, this entire async block actually is not executed. It's not started if you overload the component. And the question now is really why? My current assumption is that actually if you overload the component, what will also happen in the background is the handshake succeeded and the component is actually invoked, handles the request and sends the result back. And for the sending back, actually, these results inboxes are used. You can see that also in the logs, in the trace logs. And there's no subscriber anymore if you overload the component too much. And my assumption is that this somehow blocks then the asynchronous execution of additional requests. But Brooks, you want to add something?
Yeah, but don't let me stop you. I just have a hypothesis.
So I'm actually done. So the question here I actually wanted to raise, or I approach Brooks with, is actually, first of all, is my current understanding correct, especially about the context? And the other one would be about any help would be appreciated or hints pointing in the right direction, especially how then the response of the component is actually handled within wasmCloud or within the NUTS magic, because here the logs are not very good currently. I think this is also something which we can maybe improve, and to really check out why the component actually, or the entire application actually breaks.
Yeah, no. I think your understanding is pretty spot on. I really appreciate the effort that you put into making this diagram because I mean, one, it's spot on, but the way that WRPC like initiates an invocation and sends a handshake, it does an optimization where it'll send the payload with the first message if it's small enough, and then that continues to go out into the rest of the application. I think that this is something that WRPC works similar ways for different transports, but this would belong directly in the WRPC NATS transport documentation. Hopefully, nobody ever has to really worry about this, but um, I would say that this feels like something that tracing really should be able to help us out a lot more on. Like you should be able to stand up wasmCloud in trace mode with like
Mm.
a with tempo or the spire or whatever running, and you should be able to see some of these steps in the WRPC like output. I can't say whether or not it is there. I think there's a lot of information when you turn it on to like super trace mode. Um, but yeah, I I agree with you that like our current logs don't always expose. I'm not sure how long it took for you to find where this was going wrong, but I don't think our current logs are like, oh, well, you've got already all of these things running, and that's why this didn't work.
Yeah. So so I definitely traced it down to the NUTS WRPC transport package library. So I actually customized it to have more debug information. So that's definitely the problem is I'm still not sure if this is an issue in the WRPC part or maybe something we can improve on wasmCloud side. So what I'm also a little bit wondering is that nobody, or it seems that no one else actually is facing this issue. So I assume in production, people use too much or very high numbers of replicas defined in the application manifest. Because this scales, if you set the replica count to 2, actually, then these magic numbers I mentioned earlier also scale up. So if you define 1,000 replicas, you are fine to receive 4,000 invocations in parallel and nothing will break. So, but this is really, really, yeah, I'm really curious also about these magic numbers because they seem to be somehow, in quotes, hard coded.
I have two quick comments. And Florian already alluded to one. When it comes to tracing, and when we get to the WRPC level, things become a bit opaque. So, and I mean inside Wasm Cloud itself. So it's for especially for people that might not know the code base very well, it becomes challenging when you're using tracing in the internals of the system. The other thing here is that this is kind of tangentially relates to that topic that actually Lucas brought up and resulted in a very kind of generic, and I would say again, because at the time that that happened, I wasn't in the meeting, but I was looking into HTTP in Wasm Cloud. HTTP in Wasm Cloud is quite complicated. There are so many hops, there are so many things involved, and when you're trying to trace through that, especially for something that is widely used, it's difficult. And and I think the topic that Lucas was putting on the table wasn't about tracing. It was about how we can kind of make it more straightforward or maybe improve the implementation. Again, that was just an exploration, not necessarily there is a magic, solution here. But That's something that probably needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I um totally agree. The HTTP is um certainly complex. I think going back to like that item that's actually on the roadmap, it would be really nice to do essentially a deep dive into HTTP with our tracing on and start breaking different pieces of the system and understand if like exactly what you're going through right now, Florian. If you can look at a trace dashboard and understand where the problem is coming from, then we did a good job in that point. But if you know what the problem is and you couldn't find it, then we don't have adequate enough logs, which I'm sure is something that we could improve on forever. But no, doing it for HTTP in and out is a super common case, and we should cover that. Um, I raised my hand just to say, Florian, I linked to a PR because we actually had I'm not sure if you remember from a few weeks ago, Milan who came on and was demoing some of the Hano JS stuff.
Mm.
Um, he actually ran into a problem that sounds really similar to this. I'm not 100% sure if it's the same, but he was running a component with a max replica of 10, and he would occasionally see just the component not responding at all. And in digging into that, we could see that the HTTP server got the request, tried to send it to
Mm.
the host, and just got nothing back.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't mind, I'll steal from your screen sharing real quick just to show what the change was. This isn't something that's been released yet, so but I'll talk about that in a second. Essentially, what we were doing, and you've probably looked at this code, where we spawn a task for the exports, and then as long as we have a permit to acquire like that semaphore, then we can invoke the component by awaiting this future.
Mhm.
And so what was happening is if that this future doesn't ever complete, then
Mhm.
it never releases the semaphore. And so incoming requests will always get blocked here at trying to acquire a new permit. Um, so this fix, what it does is actually implements a timeout here, including, some metrics for tracking this so that you could actually tell that this is going wrong. Um, and if this doesn't execute the component, or sorry, if the component doesn't finish executing in the time that you've configured at when you start wasmCloud, then we will time out and release the semaphore. The way
Mhm.
that you could test the example that you're testing to see if it's this is if you set the the invocation timeout to something small, like 1 second, then after, a couple of seconds of the app freezing up, you should see those get released back. I
Mhm.
guess you're running on this PR. My theory for it is with the way that we've implemented this, there's no limit to the number of invocations you will accept coming in. And they will all queue up right waiting for another permit to be released. So if you have a max of one and you send 100, then you're going to be waiting forever for those. So potential theory. I'm interested if this would resolve it. It sounds like there's a couple things we could do, but it sounds like a similar symptom.
Yeah, I mean, I also know we've had many discussions among maintainers about making that piece of the code use better the flow control mechanisms that just come built in with Nats, because what we end up doing is queuing things coming in into a channel, um, and then drain that channel, but we're not necessarily respecting timeouts. It's like we kind of like got halfway to using Jetstream without using Jetstream because that introduces additional overhead. Um, so part of the thing there is that we want to probably handle that in the right way, and that because I'm pretty sure just how the Nats client works, that if things are not being received as they're coming in, it'll start to send a slow consumer out. And so then the queue subscribe won't get another thing on it. It'll go to other machines or everything just won't get it. Now we can't really signal back to the HTTP server without using something like Jetstream, but we can at least flow control better coming in, rather than just accepting and then dying. So that's one of those things, and it goes back to a little bit of what Masood was saying too. This is where we really need just the feedback from people like you, Florian, and others who are using it in the community of what's best, because like things like HTTP server and stuff it's the trade-off, right? Do you want the flexibility of being able to swap it out, which we've had multiple people say they want, or do you want the faster speed, less complexity, but more coupling thing, which we've also had people say they want. And so um, that's been one of the hardest things as the WasmCloud project has matured, is figuring out how we want to handle those. And when we still handle both, but like trying to optimize for both is a difficult task, I'd say. So any feedback here is great. So hearing this is really good, but I also think like there's some things we can definitely do to improve this now, and I think it does that what Brooke showed you, and then maybe if we revisit some of the flow control stuff, it would be really good.
So Taylor, I have a quick comment here. You know, you just mentioned there are some providers that have built-in implementations which you don't need to set up the provider, such as HTTP server or even messaging. And then there are the ones that you need to actually install the, the provider. And I mentioned that in a community call some time ago when Brooks was talking about embedding wasmCloud and increasing flexibility, and I mentioned that one of the good things would be to kind of lean out the runtime. So I think that's the sweet spot. For those things that become built in, they will have their own implementation inside wasmCloud, and they could be simple and basic or straightforward. And then anything else doesn't have, let's say, a WRPC implementation inside wasmCloud, or somehow it becomes an extension, and then we take that out, and that allows people to swap things and switch things if they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much along those lines. Maybe not exactly as you were describing, but I think here's the way I've always approached this, and Brooks can disagree with me. I know I've talked about this with him a lot, this specific topic around these things, and a lot of us have, is that we want to make it lean for some of those same reasons, but also I have to admit too, we're in an awkward growing, like we're in the teenage years of WASM. Like you got braces, you're like your legs are super long and the rest of your body hasn't caught up. That's kind of what like we're in with Wasm right now, because in an ideal future, what I think we really want is something where you can support all the types of things. And I know Roman and I gave a little bit of a talk about this once too when we were talking about WRPC, is you kind of have different options. You can have like a dilib that you can include, which is a security risk, but if it's something that needs to be hyper optimized and is super trusted, you could load that. You can have something that's like a plugin on the same system, which is faster, less problems with like a network connection. Then you can have like a distributed one like we have now, and then also besides a dilib, there's as WASI continues to mature, you can actually just have like a WASM thing plugin, and those are a special kind of plugin that are granted things like network access and whatnot, which would replace like the dilib method. And so I think in an ideal world, we could have all those, and having something more modular definitely helps with that. But we want to give people the ability to tweak and tune things where they need it. And I think that's the real goal. So we have the ideas. It's just limited amounts of resources and time to do it, and the fact that like things are continuing to evolve. So that's what I always think of when we come to this discussion, is there are knobs to twiddle, but we have to like have the time to do it. And so I think it's kind of a balance of we don't have the time to do all those things, combined with the fact we also are trying to like make the core leaner and then have some other parts that can swap out. And obviously Brooks, you're gonna add something there.
Yeah, no, I think that's just well said. I think what we've realized on the maintainer side is that we've taken on quite a lot of responsibility in the Wasm Cloud host, and anything we can do to make the host a little simpler, but have plugin pieces or extensibility would make this easier because people can build on the host and experiment without us needing to go through the whole like rigmarole of like, putting it into the host and making sure it works and then committing to 1.0 and all that stuff. Um, I think there's Taylor, I don't have any disagreements, but there's probably plenty more for us to talk on there. We're a little over time. And I want to be respectful of everybody, especially Florian for bringing this up. Would you like to, Florian, do you have any other comments? Do you want to wrap up this one? Just since you brought it up and spurred such great discussion.
No, many thanks, of course, to all of you for the interesting discussion and sharing your ideas in a talk fashion out of the blue. So many thanks for that. We'll definitely check it out. And what I'm also a little bit curious about, what I currently wasn't able to do, checking it out with other providers, because as you said, HTTP is also kind of special in Wasm Cloud. So checking it with another provider like messaging or a custom one would be really interesting, because this would also lead to a more serious issue in maybe one of the lower layers and not necessarily in Wasm Cloud itself, or at least not in HTTP.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, yeah, I think we should really strive to make the HTTP layer really solid because it's much more complex than a generic custom interface. Um, and then go from there.
Yeah. So as Victor asked about, I will definitely file an issue in the next couple of days. Currently, it's or definitely not today. It's already end of the day. So, but we'll do, and then we can discuss this as a community together.
Oh, come on, Apple.
Maybe we'll even have tests.
Maybe. Come on. Can't do everything. All right. Well, oh, wait. Okay. Yeah, sure. Whatever. That's fine. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming to Wasm Cloud Wednesday. And I appreciate the great discussion and demos and everything. As a reminder, these topics on the call are totally open for anybody to propose and chat about. So if you have something you want to talk about for next week, just throw in a PR or hit up one of the maintainers in Slack. I'm pretty sure if you look too closely at any one of us in general, we're going to put your thing on the agenda because we want to talk about it. So we're taking things all the time. So I think that's it. We can probably wrap it up for today. But thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week.